age 79, passed away on August 3rd, 2022. He was born on January 4th, 1943 in Seneca, Wisconsin, the son of Edward and Edith Emerson Welsh. Donald attended and graduated from Gays Mills High School, where he met his high school sweetheart, Carolyn. They married on May 18th, 1963. He worked for Madison Machine Works for 37 years before moving on to Sunstrand for 10 years, and then he retired in 2006. He was a member of this church, Emmanuel Lutheran in Phoenix Point. Donald loved to be outdoors, especially snowmobiling, and was one of the founding members of the Stillman Valley Snowmobile Club. He was also a member of the HUD City Cruisers. He was a die-hard Packer fan. Donald could build almost anything and loved working on cars after he retired, but his favorite thing to do was to travel. And Carolyn and he took many cruises all around the world. He was preceded in death by his parents, his son Craig Allen Welsh, brother Dwayne Welsh, 3 brother-in-laws, Bill Blanton, Fred Whipperford, and Fred Halsizer, and his nephew, Kenny Blanton. He is survived and dearly missed by his wife of 59 years, Carolyn of Stillman Valley. Children, a son, Peggy, Bill Welsh and Peggy. A daughter, Denise Welsh and Maki. Brother Ken Welsh and Sandra. Sister Marcy, Drake, and Floyd. Sister Marilyn Blanton. Sister Dolores Whipperford. And Sister Betty Otto and Harold. And many nieces and nephews. When Carolyn asked me to read the obituary and to tell some stories about Don, of course I immediately said yes and felt honored to do so. She wants this to be a true celebration of his life, because as you know, he lived it to the fullest. Now I'm thinking, Donnie's up there going, seriously, Carolyn? Is this the best you can do? My hillbilly sister-in-law? And I'm thinking, Donnie, remember, we're in church. So you're stuck with me, and I promise what happens in Wisconsin will stay in Wisconsin. Most people know that Carolyn was my maid of honor, and Donnie was our best man. So she is like a sister to me, and he's like a brother. And like most siblings, we had our differences, maybe a little bit political, but we had more in common than people realized. And one of those was our competitiveness, and especially when it came to playing cards, and specifically when we played euchre. And if y'all don't know about euchre, bear with me, because they were either at our house in Arizona or we were at their house. We even ran a tally. Carolyn would keep a tally on wins and losses. Now, sometimes Donnie would adjust that tally. Much to our argument from Carolyn, but we kept a tally. And Carolyn being Carolyn, she'd say, oh, it's just a game, you know. But he just loved to beat Carolyn in cards. But what he loved even more was when he would go alone. And if you play euchre, you know if you go alone and you get all 5 tricks, you get 4 points. And Carolyn and I were not gonna let that happen. We knew we had a loser and that 5 cards. And we'd sit there and sweat like crazy trying to figure out what card to keep, because we knew we had a loser. And he'd lay out that jack of hearts, lay out that jack of diamonds, and here come the ace of diamonds and maybe the queen of diamonds. And there he is holding that last card. And we'd look around, we got him, Carolyn. And because he could never lay a card down, he'd slam that card down on the table and he'd be the ace of something else, and Carolyn would give him a look that would. And I, of course, I'm like, Donnie, you knew you had them all, why you just lay them down? And he goes like, Now, I'd like to see you girls sweat. That was done. In addition to cards and competitiveness, we all know that Donnie liked cars, fast cars. Donnie was notorious for his crazy driving as a teenager. I'm told that Squeak, as he was called back in the day, would take the corners on two wheels in Bell Center, and as Bill Hutchison, his good friend, would say, quite regularly he would take out the flowers at Mrs. Dobson's corner to the point where she had just eventually moved the lilac bushes to the other side of the yard. I'm thinking they should have called him Squeal instead of Squeak, because that's what he did to the tires most of the time. Sisters Marilyn and Betty can remember him driving home from Gay's Mills, a few miles down the road from Bell Center, get to Child's Farm, and Donnie would make it his mission to squeal those tires around that corner on his way home. And Edith would calmly sit at the table and go, well, Don's home. Carolyn's dad could also hear Donnie driving, probably 2 blocks away on his way to pick her up for a date. Harold would just shake his head and go, make sure you have her home by 10. No doubt he was praying the whole time. Probably less about the 10 and more about the get her home. Carolyn and Donnie have a special love story. High school sweethearts whose love has endured and serves as a role model to so many of us. They danced their way through high school, and I mean literally danced their way through high school. Every Saturday night, probably Soldiers Grove or some family event, we would watch them dance, and it was so cool. However, I do remember one story where they went to a dance, and Donnie may have spent a little bit too much time talking to some of his buddies, leaving Carolyn over there. You may think this is a mild and meek woman, but he came to ask her for the last dance, and she refused. Donnie wasn't stopped. He went and grabbed the mop and got on the floor and danced. Donnie was going to dance.
I never heard that story.
My request, Donnie, is when you're doing the bequeathing, can you bequeath your dancing skills to your brother? Speaking of dancing, Dolores remembers when they would all go dancing every Saturday night, again, probably up to Soldiers Grove. And she'd be there with her friend Gail, and they'd make sure they danced their way over to the door so they could catch the eyes of the good-looking guys coming in that they wanted to, that they kind of had a crush on. Only to have Donnie come in the door, look at Dolores and go, hey, Moosey. And she's like, why did he call me Moosey? I mean, she weighs like 98 pounds. And she goes, Donnie, nobody's gonna date a girl or ask her out when her name is Moosey. And he would just laugh, he didn't care. He loved tantalizing his sisters. Marcy remembers how Donnie would bend his knuckles. I guess they did this at school. I don't know if it was a TikTok challenge back in that day, but anyway. So he would and dig them into her shoulders, and it would just hurt, and she'd be chasing him around the dining room table. Finally, Edith would have enough, and she'd go grab her broom and start swatting on Donnie and telling him, you get outside. I can only imagine how many brooms Edith must have used in that day. His siblings also remember Donnie wanting a bicycle. When you have 7 kids, he had to wait a while. And that didn't stop Donnie. He went to the junkyard, found a bunch of old bicycle parts, and built his own. The only problem was it didn't have any brakes. And they lived near a big hill. And he'd come flying down that hill, Edith just a spring. And she said, don't do that, and be home by dark. Now what do you think Donnie did? He went down the hill, and he went home by dark. So he finally rolled in there. He comes into the yard. Edith calmly walks out to the garage, grabs a hammer, and proceeds to beat that bicycle into a million pieces. I think Donnie learned a valuable lesson that day. Never underestimate your mother and a hammer. Don's love of cars also extended to NASCAR racing. Ken remembers a special trip they took together to Talladega. And they were at the gate and ready to enter, and the guy said, well, you can't enter until you drink your beverage. And neither one of them was gonna let a good cold beverage. So they stayed outside, and the guy came up to him and said, "Hey, you guys got tickets?" And I said, "Yeah, somewhere in the grandstand." He said, "Well, you two old guys look like you wouldn't cause any trouble, so let me give you these tickets." And Donnie and Kenny looked down, and it said, Texaco Oil Company Suite tickets. Well, man, they threw those beverages down, grabbed those tickets, found somebody else looking to buy tickets, gave them to them, and went running into that NASCAR race. Only to get about halfway in and go, I wonder if we were scammed. And we don't have any tickets, because we just gave ours away. But no, they kept proceeding, got up there, and sure enough, into the Texaco Oil Suite, big ice sculptures and food everywhere, and drink or whatever, and they're like, "Man, we hit the NASCAR jackpot." And I thought to myself, all because two old guys looked so innocent on the outside. Good thing they didn't hear the stories about the Suite before that. When I asked nieces and nephews about their story, it was almost unanimous. They remembered the same one. The Welsh Christmases were famous. This one was in 1979, according to Nicole. I didn't have the right date, but Nicole could remember it was 1979. Worst blizzard ever here. Imagine approximately 40 people in one house in Chena, Illinois. The road so bad that the only way we could get Greg and Dee in was Donnie had to go out and get them on a snowmobile. Of course, that made him happy to get on a snowmobile. So off Donnie went, the storm continued. We're now into this about 4 or 5 days. Running low on food. So Don gets all suited up and takes off to get food. But not before he made us a sign for the bathroom. But remember, we got 40 people, a septic tank, and blizzard. So the sign read, and kids, you can read it along with me. If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. I still remember Donnie coming back on that snowmobile. I mean, he had a beard and it was just frozen solid, and he looked like the abominable snowman coming up the road. But he had groceries for us. So many stories.
Remember that?
I mean, we got a brand new Yamaha snowmobile, 0 miles on it, no snow that day, snowed on Thursday. Billy didn't have school, so guess what, Billy? He was going to take that snowmobile out, give it a ride, unhook the speedometer so Donnie couldn't see that there weren't any miles. Goes out there, it was snowing like crazy. But what Billy didn't account for was the sewer lid open. And down went that snowmobile. And just as coincidence would have it, he's dragging it back into the highway, or into the driveway as Donnie's coming home. I don't know the end of that story, but Bill's still alive, so I'm thinking it must have been okay. You know, Donnie cars and cards and competitive. What you didn't know was Donnie cooked. Now, Carolyn could make a 7-course meal on a Sunday for everybody out in Arizona, but occasionally Donnie would get out on the grill, and he was the king of shish kebab. I mean, he would make Denise and Maki. I mean, if you can picture Donnie over there meticulously slicing up these little veggies and putting them on that skewer, and steak for the carnivores in his family, and fish for me, but they were delicious. And everybody in Arizona, Carolyn, sends their love. They miss him dearly. And my one last food story, and this is probably more about Carolyn than it is Donnie, but we all know it. Because she'd get up every morning and pack his lunch like a dutiful wife. Kenny, you married a long woman. But anyway, so one day Donnie calls her and says, "Carolyn, what did you put in this tuna fish? Because it tastes a little funny." "Well, my normal tuna fish." "Well, keep over it." So she goes over and looks at the can and the garbage. It's cat food. But Donnie was okay. She made the lunch. He ought to have been happy. So But again, so many stories, and if you have any to share later on, I encourage you to do that at lunch or come by her house and share those stories. I mean, she will treasure those forever. But I will close by saying this. Donnie never met a wall he could knock down or rebuild. He was an amazing carpenter. And it reminds me of when Jesus was trying to comfort the disciples because he knew he was about to leave them. So in John 14, he says, "Do not let your heart be troubled or worried. You believe in God, you also believe in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If it were not so, I would not tell you. I am going to prepare a place for you." I'm thinking, God needed another carpenter to build some more rooms, and he got one of the best. Yes, we will laugh, and we will cry, and we will mourn, and we will miss him beyond measure. But I leave you with this. John 16:22. So also you have sorrow now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take that joy from you. Rest in peace, Donnie. We love you, and we will see you again.